The ballroom goes still before anyone touches her. Not the way rooms go quiet when something breaks. The way they go quiet when 300 people simultaneously decide to recalculate. It moves through the space from the entrance inward, conversations cutting off in sequence, guests turning in sequence, and none of them are looking at Celine Mar. They're watching the man at the center table, waiting to see how he registers what just walked through his door. She's been waiting 2 years to walk into this room. She knows Dario Kest's corporate architecture 4 layers down. She knows the holding companies, the real estate network, the financial routes that took her 14 months to trace far enough to find what she needed. She built the file pressed under her arm from public records, intercepted documents, and the particular patience of someone who has already lost the thing she was most afraid of losing and has nothing left but one question that refuses to stay buried. What she didn't account for, until 30 seconds ago, is how her name got onto the guest list. The security officer at the entrance checked his tablet, looked at her face, stepped aside. No call made, no hesitation. Hey, before we go further, if you found out that the person you'd spent years trying to destroy was actually the only one who had ever tried to save someone you loved, what would you do with all that time you spent being wrong? Leave your answer in the comments. Because that question is the center of everything that's about to happen in this story. The room performs around her. A string quartet near the stage. Crystal on crystal. Official laughter timed a half-beat behind itself. She doesn't look at any of it. She watches the 4 security posts along the columns, none of them watching a door, all of them watching the man at the center table. He raises 2 fingers from the tablecloth. Just that. The quartet stops mid-phrase. Sound drops from the room. 140 people hold still at once, not with fear, not with confusion, with the practiced compliance of people who have learned exactly what this signal costs to ignore. Power is easiest to measure by how many people move before a command is spoken. Celine keeps walking. By the time she reaches him, one thing has settled into her with the weight of something she should have understood earlier: she is not the person who arranged tonight. He looks at her the way a man looks at a clock running exactly on schedule. You came, he says. She drops the envelope on the table in front of him. I brought receipts. He doesn't look at the envelope. You brought the file I expected. He rises before she can respond. No hand raised, no signal passed, just the movement of a man who has never needed to clear a path because paths clear themselves. Guests angle away as he passes. Staff redirect. Dario moves through the gala the way something moves through a space it was built for, and Celine follows because the alternative is standing at that table alone in the center of a room that just watched her arrive. The library is at the end of a corridor, not on any public architectural filing she studied. Tall shelves. Books with pristine, unbroken spines, purchased to fill space rather than to be read. A fire burning at its own low, settled rhythm. And a desk at the center of the room, with a folder already positioned on it. Not placed in a hurry. Set with the care of something that was never going to be a surprise. She sees the folder the moment she walks through the door. People mistake composure for innocence because panic is easier to recognize than planning. She doesn't touch the folder on the desk. She crosses to it and drops her own file down on the surface with the deliberate flatness of someone who has spent 2 years preparing for exactly this gesture. Theomar, she says. My brother. Found in the harbor 18 months ago. Car on the bridge, phone smashed. And every piece of documentation connecting your operation to his death was pulled from the precinct database within 48 hours of the body being identified. Dario stands at the edge of the firelight with his hands at his sides. He hasn't moved toward the desk. He looks at her the way someone looks at a document they have already read. You rehearsed that, he says. You had him killed. You believe that. I've built the case for it. You've built a case for what you were meant to find. He says it without inflection, no sharpness, no satisfaction. Just facts set down beside hers, the way you set down a second exhibit. There's a difference between those two things. Her jaw closes a fraction tighter. She prepared for confrontation. She prepared for denial, for referrals to attorneys, for the kind of measured silence that money purchases. She did not prepare for a man who already has the other argument. He walks to the desk, opens her file, reads in silence, closes it without expression, then reaches into his jacket, no theater in the movement, and slides a second folder across the surface toward her. She looks at it before she opens it. The fire settles in the grate. The folder was already here when she arrived. He didn't retrieve it. He didn't request it. It was on this desk before she entered this room, before she found this corridor, before any version of tonight that she designed. She opens the second folder and finds her brother's name on the first page. The record is a surveillance log. Her brother's name at the header, a start date 3 weeks before he died, and a sequence of activities that has nothing to do with the life she knew. Drop coordinates. Cash transfers in amounts small enough to be untraced, regular enough to be a system. A name appearing 6 times across the first 3 pages, Run Vargo, that she has never heard before this moment. She doesn't know the name, but she already feels the weight of it. She turns to the final entry. Her brother's number. Dario's private line. Timestamp, 11:48 p.m. on a Thursday, 9 days before the body. Call duration, 11 minutes. 2 follow-up notations below the call log in a different hand. She reads the first, reads the second, sets the page down, and picks it up again because sometimes reading something twice is the only way to accept that it says what it says. Lies survive longest when grief is carrying them. An extraction was arranged. A transit route confirmed. Funds allocated to cover 2 weeks of relocation while Theo cleared the city. A window, 4:40 in the morning. A driver confirmed and positioned. 40 minutes to get her brother into a vehicle and out. He wasn't informing on you, Celine says. He was skimming margins from an operator named Vargo. Dario's voice carries no verdict on anyone in this story. He didn't know whose money it was when he started. By the time he understood the structure of what he'd walked into, he had 8 months of exposure behind him. He called me because I was the only person who could move before Vargo moved first. He should have called me. He made a decision about what he wanted to protect. A pause that carries weight without filling it. People do that. They're usually wrong about what a person can carry. But they do it out of something real. She wants to push back. She doesn't, because she recognizes the logic, the way someone decides what the person they love can handle, and how often that decision costs more than the original danger would have. She returns to the log. The window opened. The driver waited. 18 minutes before the extraction point window closed, the route was compromised. She sets the page down carefully. Law enforcement buried the investigation within 2 days. That doesn't happen without someone standing giving the direction. A sergeant attached to the commissioner's office passed the route to Vargo's contact, Dario says. He died in a car accident 14 months later. Vargo keeps a clean chain. But the authorization for the leak didn't originate with the sergeant. Why did law enforcement bury the evidence? The thought settles into her without resolution, not because she can't follow the implication, but because following it puts a face on something that has been faceless for 18 months, and faces change what is possible and what is required. She looks at Dario. The killer is in the ballroom tonight. She doesn't answer immediately. She sets the folder on the desk. She looks at the fire, at the books, at the shape of the room, at anything that is not Dario cast, because she needs a moment before the information that has just rearranged 2 years of her life stops moving long enough to be examined. Some people do favors the way generals open fronts. You could have told me this at any point, she says. You weren't in a position to do anything useful with it. Neither was I. Not yet. That's not your decision to make. It became mine the night your brother called me. No apology in it. Not a defense. Just the flat acknowledgement of someone who made a calculation, knows how it reads, and won't pretend it was something less deliberate than it was. She turns from the fire. What changed between 18 months ago and tonight? He looks at her with the steady attention of someone measuring what they're about to say against what it will cost. You changed, he says. You spent 18 months building a structural case that would have taken someone with institutional support 3 years. You found Vargo's financial network through a non-profit dissolution that no one else examined. You traced 3 of his operational names through civil court filings in a different jurisdiction. Something shifts in how he says the next part, not flattery, not performance, more like a man acknowledging a fact he has been waiting to acknowledge. You were 2 names from this room without any help from me. She goes still. You've been monitoring my investigation. I've been watching someone dismantle a cover-up with no institutional access and no legal backing. The organizations that turned your appeals down. The attorneys who stopped returning your calls after hitting the same wall twice in the same database. You noticed the pattern. You kept going. He pauses. That kind of persistence is rare enough that it changes what's possible. She thinks about the anonymous tip she received 8 months ago, an untraceable message directing her toward the Vargo financial connection. She had attributed it to a disgruntled insider looking for an exit. She is understanding now that she may have attributed it wrong. What does he gain by clearing her understanding now? The question doesn't settle. It turns in her with the particular motion of something that has more than one answer. He moves toward the door. He doesn't rush. He moves with the deliberateness of someone who has already determined that the next several minutes are fixed, and is simply taking his place in them. In 10 minutes I'm going to walk back into that ballroom, he says. I need one person beside me who understands what's happening and why. Someone the cameras record. Someone whose presence in the frame carries weight. He holds the door. I need you to stand beside me publicly. Right now. She looks at him. At the door. At the 2 folders under her arm. She doesn't say yes. But she walks through the door. He doesn't brief her on the walk back through the corridor. He gives her no role, no speaking line, no instructions. He moves through the gala toward the stage area and stops at a gap between 2 columns where the overhead wash falls directly in. She clocks this within seconds because she has been mapping rooms professionally for 2 years. The 6 nearest cameras have unobstructed sight lines to this exact position. He stops there. She stops beside him. She notices that he notices she noticed. Neither of them says anything about it. Public disgrace is rarely about shame. It is about inventory. Everyone counts who is still useful. The MC announces a program addition with the smooth warmth of someone accustomed to last-minute adjustments. Commissioner Halden is called to the stage. A recognition, the MC says, a celebration of sustained public service. Halden moves through the crowd with the ease of a man who has attended 500 rooms like this one, who has calibrated every handshake in this city, and knows which ones to hold a half-second longer. He moves like a man who has never once been the object of an ambush. He reaches the base of the stage steps. Places one hand on the railing. The screens behind the stage change. No preamble. No transition. Just data, payment records with routing numbers and 6-year dates. Transfers from a holding company registered through one of Vargo's distribution subsidiaries, deposited in increments clean enough to pass a standard audit and obvious enough to read clearly when you are specifically looking into an account under a name Celine doesn't immediately place until she reads it twice. Halden's wife's maiden name. Below that, a second set. Text exchanges. Dates. Halden's personal number. The sergeant's number. The first exchange timestamped 9 days before Theomar's extraction window was set to open. The room doesn't process it immediately. There is a beat of confusion, then comprehension moving through the space in visible sequence, people turning to share the reading with the person nearest them, the collective experience of watching something that should be impossible become documented fact. Halden reaches for the microphone at the podium. The audio cuts. Not a technical failure, a decision. Immediate, timed to the exact second he extends his hand. The microphone is dead before he touches it. He stands at the podium holding a mic that has nothing left in it, and looks at the screen still displaying his name above a routing number, and Celine watches him understand, in real time, the difference between a room he owns and a room he only thought he owned. He looks at the exits. Security is facing inward at each one. The two men behind him are standing wrong, their weight distributed the way people stand when they are waiting, not performing. Why did Dario insist she stand exactly here, in the direct path of every camera in this section of the room? The question turns without landing. She is where he placed her. She is in every frame. The screens shift again. New records load beneath the first set. Celine watches Halden find Dario in the crowd. Watches the precise moment a man recognizes that the structure he spent years building has been used as the instrument of its own dismantling. The screens continue to light with payment records tying Halden directly to the murder route leak. The screens are still running when Halden is removed through the side corridor. Two men at his elbows, no announcement to the room, no formal transition. The gala doesn't stop. That is the particular efficiency of what Celine is watching, not crisis management, not improvisation. Completion. Each piece going exactly where it was designed to go, at exactly the speed it was designed to travel. Dario moves through the aftermath without appearing to direct it. He speaks to two attorneys near the east wall, both of whom leave immediately in different directions. He places a call that lasts 40 seconds, says 4 words she can't hear, ends it. He addresses a man she doesn't recognize with a nod toward the side exit. Nothing in any of these exchanges has the texture of response. They have the texture of scheduled motion. Coincidence becomes frightening when it arrives unstationary. She thinks about the tip she received 8 months ago, untraceable, routed through an address she had used exactly twice and considered private. The contact it produced, a retired precinct records clerk who had been unreachable for a decade and then, with no visible trigger, became both willing to speak and precisely documentation ready at the right moment. She had attributed it to an insider looking for cover. She had filed that attribution and moved on because it was clean enough to work with. She sets down her glass. She moves to the event coordinator's table at the far end of the room and locates the registration binder in 3 minutes. Standard protocol, 1 printed copy per gala, alphabetical, dated at the cover. She opens to the reserved invitation block. Runs her finger down. Her name is there. 3rd from the bottom. Not inserted on a separate sheet. Not handwritten against a different margin. Typeset in the same font, same size, same format as every name above it. The paper grain is uniform across the entire page. She checks the inside cover. The binder was printed 6 months ago. 6 months ago, she had not identified the Vargo financial thread. 6 months ago, she had not received the tip that redirected everything. 6 months ago, she had not spoken to anyone in this building, had not crossed into the section of her investigation that made tonight possible. She was 3 significant discoveries short of knowing this event would occur. She moves toward the east corridor. Dario is standing with a single aide who excuses himself before she reaches them. She holds the binder open to the page. "My name was here 6 months ago," she says. "Before I knew Vargo's name. Before I had spoken to a single person in this room." He looks at the page. He doesn't adjust. She starts to speak. She stops. Because behind him, on a secondary table in the corridor, there is a ledger lying open, his, not hers, and she can read the column format from where she stands. She steps closer. She reads the header date. She finds the entry in the left column near the center of the visible page. Her name. 8 months prior. In his archive 8 months before she sent the first inquiry that could have put her on anyone's radar inside his operation. She sees her own name typed in Dario's archive ledger months before contact. She doesn't leave the corridor. The ledger is still open on the table in front of her, dated 8 months before any version of Celine Mar existed in this world. She stands with it and gives Dario the full accounting, not as accusation. As inventory. 8 months, she says. Before the tip. Before the clerk became willing to speak. Before any of it. March, he says. 3 years ago. You filed a FOIA request on precinct property records. You approached it through zoning irregularities tied to a facility no one else had examined. That entry point wasn't obvious. Rescue can resemble ownership when one person wrote the map. 3 years. She says it the way you say something when you're not expecting confirmation and receive it anyway. You've been inside my investigation for 3 years. I've been watching someone dismantle a cover-up without institutional access or legal cover, he says. The two things are different. The distinction belongs to you, not to me. She thinks about the sequence of her work across those 3 years. The contacts that opened at precisely the right moments. The source she attributed to professional goodwill, whose willingness now reads differently. The anonymous tip that arrived on an address she used twice. She has mapped each of these as the product of effort and timing and the momentum of patient methodology. She is standing in a corridor understanding that at least some of them had a different origin. The line between her agency and his engineering is not where she placed it, and she cannot locate it cleanly from here. Was any of it real? The question doesn't arrive with force. It arrives the way you notice a load-bearing wall is in a different position than you thought, quietly, once you have already built the room. The January tip, she says. He doesn't confirm it directly. He doesn't need to. The clerk. A decade of silence, and then she becomes documentation ready at exactly the right point. She watches his face. You gave her something. Cover, or the specific assurance she needed to stop being afraid. I created the condition, he says. What she told you was hers to give. That is not less than interference. No, he says. It isn't. She looks at the ledger. Then at him. The employers. Atlas. Meridian. The foundation position in April. He's quiet. Every rejection in a 72-hour window. Every one following a significant push in my investigation. You needed me in the city. You needed me in reach. He names them. For positions, in sequence, dates, and mechanisms included. He delivers this the way he delivers everything, without drama, without the frame that would make it smaller than it is. She looks at him when he finishes. The corridor is quiet. The Gala persists under the doors at the far end, the managed noise of people performing comfort in expensive rooms. In here the only sound is the ventilation running and the particular absence of anything being explained away. I knew about you, he says, before you knew I existed. The corridor is quiet except for the ventilation. Celine stands with both files under her arm and does the accounting, not in Dario's direction, not for his record. For herself. Because if she doesn't do it now, she will carry it without name, and that is worse. 31 months since Theo died. She begins there and moves forward. Her mother's surgery. Celine found out by missed call while running a cross-reference 2 states away. She arrived on the 3rd day. Her mother thanked her for coming. Celine sat at the kitchen table with a laptop open and returned 2 calls while her mother slept in the adjacent room. She told herself it was the work. The work required that. 3 attorneys, paid out of savings maintained specifically for this purpose. All 3 hit the same wall in the same precinct database at the same depth and went silent. She attributed the pattern to targeted obstruction. It was architecture built at a different level than she understood. A relationship that ended in a parking lot because the other person said you've been gone for 2 years, and was not talking about distance. One birthday, Theo would have turned 31, she spent in a library assembling a cross-reference document she now understands was seeded, in part, by someone who decided her methodology would produce results on a timeline she had no visibility into. She thinks about trust, not in Dario, but in herself. In the methodology she believed she was controlling. In the sense that she knew which doors she was opening. That belief needs to be renegotiated now, at 31 months in, with nowhere clean to put the work done inside it. The cruelest theft is time, because no court can restore inventory already spent. She turns. He hasn't moved. He is watching her with an expression she has not seen before tonight, not the composed management of a man who prepared for every variable. Something else. The face of someone who did not account for this particular input, what it looks like when the other person stops accusing and simply does the math. He looks wounded not when she names what he did. Not when she lists the employers, the tip, the 3 years. He receives those without visible change. It is the silence between her words, the moments when she stops speaking and is simply present with the Count, where something opens in him that he does not conceal. She notices this. She decides not to use it. "I'm not going to wait for you to tell me the outcome justifies it," she says. "Don't make the case. Not to me." He says nothing. Which is, she thinks, the first honest thing he has offered tonight. She withdraws the original document from the first file, the one she built across 31 months, and places it back under her arm alongside the second. She walks toward the exit. She doesn't tell him what she plans to do with them. 2 days. Halden's resignation arrives as a prepared statement at 6 in the morning, timed for minimum live coverage. By 7, every major network is running a crawl. By 9, Vargo's name is in the third paragraph of a wire story connecting the payment records to a federal narcotics case that stalled 3 years ago and has now reopened. By noon, 3 journalists who were present at the gala have published documentation of what the screens displayed. None of it requires additional verification. Anyone in that ballroom already saw it. On day 3, Halden's attorneys begin negotiating. On day 4, 2 of Vargo's distribution operators are arrested at a logistics facility across the state line. Led story by midday on every outlet that covered the gala. On day 5, the federal prosecutor's office contacts Celine through her attorney. Documentation. Cooperation. A formal request. She doesn't answer. What she does is book a room at the Civic Center. One notification sent to a single wire service. Subject: official documentation regarding the death of Theomar. The room is oversubscribed within 4 hours. She arrives carrying 2 manila folders. 43 journalists. 6 camera operators. 3 television crews. Representatives from the federal prosecutor's office. 2 people from organizations she approached in the first year of her investigation and was turned away from without explanation. 1 attorney identifying himself as representing no party in particular. The chairs at the back are standing room. The heat in the room is the specific heat of people who have been waiting for a story they know is about to land. She walks to the podium. She sets both folders on the lectern. Left folder, Halden. 6 years of payments, routing numbers, holding companies. The sergeant's communications. The night the extraction route was passed to Vargo's contact. Complete. Right folder, Dario Kest. 3 years of surveillance against a private citizen without legal authorization. Employer interference. Engineered contacts. The full record of a man who constructed her investigation's timeline from the outside. Also complete. Both real. Both verifiable. She has been holding them for 5 days. She adjusts the microphone. The door at the back of the room opens. Dario walks in. No attorney. No security. No preparation visible. He passes 3 people who recognize him and does not stop. He reaches the front row. He sits. He folds his hands on his knees and looks at the podium. He is not here to stop her. He is here the way a man is present at an accounting he helped build, not to contest it. To witness it. She considers what it means that he came here without preparation for damage control. Either he has already accepted the outcome, or he has calculated that what she is about to do will produce the ending he has been building towards since the beginning. She cannot determine which. She files it. She picks up the first folder. The room leans forward. She is standing at this podium carrying 2 files, one against Halden, one against Dario, and every person in this room is waiting to see which one she opens first. She opens the left folder first. Halden's record takes 11 minutes. She names every payment, every routing number, every holding company and subsidiary account. The sergeant. The communication chain. The specific night the extraction route was passed. She reads the date of Theo's death into the official record, against the payment that preceded it by 9 days, and she does not editorialize. She does not look at the federal representatives. She reads. Some victories feel clean only until you ask who arranged the room. She sets the Halden folder down. She opens the right one. This documentation describes a surveillance operation conducted against a private citizen without legal authorization, for a period of 3 years. She looks up once, briefly, at the front row. The subject of the operation is Dario Kest. The private citizen surveilled was me. She reads the employer interference. The engineered contacts. The anonymous tip. 3 years of architecture she was not informed of. She reads it with the same voice she used for Halden, even pace, clear language, the full record placed into the room where it belongs. In the front row, Dario has not moved. His hands are still on his knees. He is watching her the way a man watches something complete itself, not with relief, not with regret. With the specific stillness of someone who placed something in motion long enough ago that arrival feels inevitable. When she finishes, the room holds. Then Dario does something that stays with her. He doesn't look at the cameras. He doesn't look at the attorneys or the journalists, or the federal representatives taking notes. He looks at her, and at the corner of his mouth there is something that is not a smile and is not surrender, something that has no clean name, and it arrives only after the second folder is closed. Only after the assets are in the record and the control is gone, and there is nothing left to manage. Only then. She closes both folders. She picks them up. I won't be making further statements, she says. I won't be accepting representation from any organization. I won't be entering into agreements regarding this documentation. She walks through the side door. She stands in the corridor with both folders and the quiet and thinks about what that expression meant. About whether the choice she made at that podium was entirely her own. About whether a man capable of 3 years of patient design had, somewhere in the long arithmetic of it, already accounted for this ending too. She walks toward the exit. The question does not stay behind. If this story left you with that specific feeling, the one that arrives when you've done everything right and still can't be certain the room wasn't already arranged, drop it in the comments. Tell me where you were when it hit you. What moment made you stop? If you're new here, this channel exists for stories like this one. Stories where nobody's hands are entirely clean. Stories where the truth, when it finally arrives, doesn't come with clear instructions for what to do with it. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss what's coming. The next story is going to be harder to watch and harder to forget.